Oh, all right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the conversation between Chika Unigwe and Aruni Kashyap about the fabulous, incredible, traumatizing, but brilliant and gripping novel of Nani's life, The Middle Daughter. And I just want to give a quick introduction. I know you're all here because you already know who everybody is. But I'll just give a quick intro. And before I do that, I just want to say that as of now, the format is basically that, that Aruni and Chika will have a conversation for about 40 minutes, followed by 20 minutes to half an hour questions from all of you who are in the Zoom room. And then after that, I'm going to have to mute whoever is speaking. I'll be very strict. Sorry. Okay. And then after that, whoever wants to stay on, just indicate, or we'll flow into more conversation if Chika has time, and so on. Whoops. All right. I'm muting some of you for the moment. Oh, okay. All right. So Chika Unigwe is a Nigerian writer based in the United States. She was born in Enugu, which is where the novel is also based, and lived in Belgium for a very long time. And then for even longer, you've now lived in the US in Atlanta, Georgia. One of the things that shocks me about Chika is that she writes in English and in Dutch. Am I right? Not Dutch. Is it
not anymore? No, it's Dutch, but not anymore.
Okay, but like you have some stuff to show in Dutch, which is wild. And of course, I'm sure you speak, Nigerian languages as well. She's the author of several novels, as well as numerous short stories and essays. Her works include On Black Sister Street, Night Dancer, Better Never Than Late, and Black Messiah, among others. And you are currently professor of creative writing at Georgia College. Yeah. And Aruni, it's very, and one of the things about Chika, of course, that over the years I've had the honor to publish her short stories on Warscapes in some anthologies and on the website as well. So I'm really grateful for your support and honored about it. Aruni is a friend, so I don't know how I'm supposed to talk about him, but he is a writer and a brilliant translator from and into Assamese. And he's also an academic, so he wears lots of hats. He is the author of His Father's Disease, which is a collection of short stories, The House with 1,000 Stories, which is a novel, There Is No Good Time for Bad News, which is poems. This is getting crazy. He is also associate professor of English at the University of Georgia, Athens, and the director of the creative writing program. And there are no announcements that I can make that won't reveal secrets, but Aruni has been working on a novel that I have had the joy of reading, and it's going to be so good when it comes out. So we should all be excited. All right, and off to you, Aruni, take over from here. Thank you both for being here.
I'm going to start by Hi, I'm going to start by confessing something. So I'm attending Radical Books probably after a year almost, right? Isn't it? Last time I was here, we were discussing a Korean novel. The format was different. So I have questions for actually mainly for the audience. So, but we are academics, so I'm going to flip it around and improvise and have questions for Chika. But anyway, I'm really thrilled that I'm doing this, and I am. It's been such a privilege and honor to be Chika's friend for all these years. We have known each other for, I don't know, like for 10, 11 years now, right? Forever, yeah. And we have discussed our writerly problems. We have discussed and bitched about publishing. We have discussed and bitched and succeeded so far in academia, survived. So we are great survivors in that way. And but one thing that amazes me about Chika is that she's so prolific. She does so much work, and every book she writes is so gripping. And this book was no different. And I was talking to Bhakti about how gripping it is. And I was like, why are the Nigerians such great storytellers? And Chika is one of them, and she's amazing. And we didn't know. I mean, so maybe I can just ask you, Chika, what is it about how do you pay attention to storytelling? Like it is, anything you have written is the plot and the story and the characters. They're all so much in tandem with each other. what kind of sort of, as you are now a professor of creative writing also, and I know that you are not trained like many of us, we both had books contracted with and published before we got wore our creative writing hats. Like I had a book contract before I came to an MFA. I needed an MFA in order to sort of qualify to teach, and you had a PhD in English from Leiden, and then you started teaching creative writing. But you were, both of us are in by training literary scholars. So I wanted to ask, as you are thinking about the practice of fiction writing, the craft of fiction writing, and you're thinking also outside the confines and conventions of the MFA classroom, the creative writing classroom. And what I see is that you write such gripping stories. So how do you, so I know it's instinctive, I'm a writer as well, but at the same time, how are you looking at your craft now? How do you sort of pay attention to storytelling and keep the reader's hook? What are the techniques that you use?
So first of all, thank you very much, Aruni and Bhakti, for all the wonderful and kind things that you said about my writing. And thank you to everyone who's joined from Paris and from Nigeria and from Madrid and from, it feels like we're in the world, right? So I'm really grateful. And yes, you're right. I started off writing before I came into teaching, and I don't have formal training in writing. But one of the things that I tell my students is that they should always remember that that fiction or a story is different from an anecdote. That's always how I start my lessons, right? A story isn't an anecdote. A story isn't real life, right? A story is true, but it's not real life, because in real life doesn't ask for motives. So a man can wake up in the morning and kill his wife and say, well, he just snapped. You can't do that in fiction. You can't have people just snapping in fiction. You have to set the background for that person to snap. So we have to see that guy who is going to snap and kill his wife, maybe kick a dog. We have to see him maybe throw things around the house. We have to hear him tell his wife, well, one day I might just kill you. So that when he does that, even though it is surprising, it feels inevitable, right? It doesn't completely side blind us. So when I'm writing, I'm thinking of why characters do the things that they do and why they take the decisions that they take. And I'm thinking about a character's background and history, even if all of that history you do not see on page, but I have to know all of that character's history to understand how they, why they act or react the way that they do, right? So for example, when Nani goes off with Ephraim, right? We understand that Nani is preempting her mother's reaction, because that is the sort of person that Nani is. There's somewhere in the novel where her sisters ask her to go with them to ask their father to put a rooftop pool in the house. And Nani says, why bother going when we know they're going to say no? And so in all throughout the novel, I sort of sprinkle all of these sort of details about Nani so that when Nani does what she does, it doesn't seem completely out of the blue.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's so important, that fiction is a reconstruction of reality. And there are many times I think we have had people in our classrooms where they say, but this happened. I know a person like this.
Yes.
But so what? You have to construct it in a way. And I felt that you're writing about a pretty shocking thing. It is even more shocking for Nani, what happens to her in the middle of the book, right? At the end of part one. And I saw that you were preparing the reader, but not necessarily Nani, for it to come, because we are getting this insight about Ephraim's, how do you say it? Right? Ephraim's viewpoints and what kind of a manipulative, predatorial kind of person he is. So, so do you think that while you're writing this book, it was about such a hard topic? How did you create these monologues and point of views of Ephraim and prepare the reader? Was this the motivation that went into it?
Yeah, and so the one of think the earliest draft of the novel had only Nani's voice. And the earliest draft of the novel was written in 2014 or 2013, so a long time ago. So the very first draft had only Nani's voice, but it seemed a bit monotonous. And I love playing with voices. I love multivocal novels. I love sort of the polyphony of voices, and I wanted to try that. And framing it as a retelling of a Greek myth, but not having some of the qualities of a Greek myth didn't seem quite right, which is also why the chorus comes in. And then for Ephraim, I wondered a lot about Ephraim's motivations, and I wondered a lot about Ephraim the person, even though I created him, that I realized that it was in my best interest to give Ephraim space, to allow myself to enter into Ephraim's space and then to articulate Ephraim the way that he was articulating himself to me. And all I was just a transcriber, right? To be honest, because I saw this book as sort of a balancing, of power. I wanted Nani to have the central space. I wanted Nani to, to have the whole, to be the one, to be the voice of it. I really did not want Ephraim speaking, because Ephraim is a very narcissistic person and he has the tendency to want to, take over, right? And I didn't want that to happen. So I had to constantly, make sure that Ephraim did not get more space than he was due, right?
Yeah, in fact, some of the shortest chapters belong to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I didn't want him to have too much space. I didn't think that he deserved that. And also, every character I write, I inhabit. So sort of being under Ephraim's skin for too long, nah.
Yeah, not appealing at all, Yeah.
So I could only tolerate him for short bits. And every time I wrote Ephraim, I felt so vile. I wanted to go take a shower to, sort of just, cleanse myself.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard reading him, but at the same time, I think it should be hard. There is something that I think we talk a lot about in contemporary publishing is about how do you write violence, and your book and even my books, they have violence because we write about the reality, hard-hitting realities. How do you negotiate that thing? Do you see yourself writing more directly and explicitly as you write more and more books, or do you see yourself toning it down as you sort of write more books? And I was thinking about this because I read your other works. I was thinking about this, and I was also thinking about something that Marlon James had said, that we have to depict violence as violent, and it is narrative cowardice. But at the same time, mostly in actually also MFA classrooms now, that we inhabit every day, there is so much resistance against depiction of violence. So how do we as writers negotiate it, and how did you negotiate it in this book in such a disturbing topic? And by disturbing, I mean it's just an observation. It is not a critique.
No, absolutely. No. I think that a good book shouldn't leave you unmoved in any way, right? And I think that if there is violence in a book, you should be able to feel it as violence, but it doesn't have to be gratuitous, and it doesn't have to be graphic for it to be visceral, right? So our tools are words. And so I'm constantly thinking about how to use the language at my disposal to create the fear, for example, that Nani feels, that night when she's in Ephraim's house. And sometimes the more graphic you are, the more attention people are paying to the graphicness of it, And so when you're letting the graphicness do the work that emotions should do, right? And that is never a good thing. It's like what I tell my students: when you want to write about love, don't tell me, oh, I love, A love C. Show me that love, right? So show me the love, show me the guy bringing her breakfast in bed because he knows that she likes breakfast in bed, right? Show me him, cutting off the crusts because this is what she loves to do, So, so emotions should be visceral because of the way that you write them, not because of the not because of what you show on paper, right?
Yeah. No, I think as both Amrita and Satya are saying here that, I mean, I love what you said just now, because I think we often go into just being very vivid, especially in certain kind of situations. So we think that should we just be very, what do I say, like a mimetic sort of representation. And I think that you're doing that. In fact, even in that horrific scene, it gets over in one paragraph, but it's Nani's emotions that we know how it impacts her again and again and again. With so much of how she feels, how conflicted she feels, how angry she feels.
Yeah. And for me, that is more important, right?
Absolutely.
Than, the act is horrific, but the way it affects Nani, right, is equally, it's probably more important to me as a writer than the what, yeah. And Nani's dissociation from the moment is what really happens when, I wanted it to feel, I didn't want readers to come there and read and be like, oh, wow, this is what Ephraim is doing, right?
Yeah.
I wanted readers to come in and say, this is what is happening to Nani. So the focus remains on Nani and not this guy who is doing, all of that horrific thing.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, this is, when I was reading it, I actually reminded me of the rape scene in Bluest Eye, because it is also so much focuses on Piccola Breedlove's emotions, and not on the graphic nature of the work that because it's so easy to do that, that to not just violence, but also love, to just show it in the most vivid, explicit manner.
Yeah, and that's shorthand, right? That's, that's you not wanting to enter into it and enter into the emotions, right?
Yeah.
And shorthand is never good for fiction, right?
Yeah. And that's why I think it becomes, it is far more artistically challenging to actually focus on the emotions and go deeper inside it and show how the character is feeling. So I think you have achieved that. I want to switch gears a little bit from this. And I wanted to ask you, you did some research on the baby producing factories. Can you tell us about what you learned and how you managed to, I know you did a lot of research, obviously some of it features here, but would you like to share anything and how it kind of seeped into the book as you're working?
Thank you. Yeah, so I was put in touch with someone from the Red Cross who'd worked with women who had been abducted and taken to some of these homes. And for those of you who don't know, so a baby factory is either a hospital or like as in the middle daughter, or a home where women are kept, sometimes against their will. And the person that I spoke to via the Red Cross, her sister was abducted and put in one of such homes, and she was regularly raped and got pregnant, and the baby is taken from her and then sold off. And she said her sister got ill and was brought back home to die. Then I spoke to another woman who was pregnant, and somebody told her that she could get a job for earning 10,000 naira a month. 10,000 naira a month is about $10 now, because the naira is sort of gone down. It's about $10 a month, working as a domestic, only for her to get there. And they had, she wasn't supposed to work as a domestic. They wanted her for her pregnancy, for her womb, and for that baby. She didn't know who the father of the baby was. A Nigerian journalist recently, Fisayo Soyimbo, did a documentary on this. And if you're interested to learn more, on YouTube, just Google Arrow of God Orphanage. And he actually did manage to buy a child. He managed to buy a child, and he handed over the child to an agency. I haven't followed it up, but I think that the agency is supposed to find a good home for the baby. But this novel, so I did the research because I wanted to understand how Nani's mother justified what or how she justified what she did, right? But it's something that I've become really interested in, and I'm hoping to write a novel that is, encompasses it a lot more.
What were the risks involved in researching and writing about this?
So for this one, unlike researching on Black Sister Street, where I, had to go into, for want of a better word, the den, right? I had connections, people connected me to people. So I didn't talk to anybody who was running any of those things. I talked to the victims. So there was really no risk. I just had to pay them. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Black Sister Street is another amazing, amazing novel by Chika, which is set in Amsterdam
In Antwerp.
Sorry, Antwerp, sorry. Yeah, in Antwerp, which is basically about a lot of Nigerian sex workers and African sex workers who are exploited there. And some of them it's told through the story perspective of these women. And Chika actually spent a lot of time with them, actually researching it. And so I really commend and applaud how she goes into the actual field and does the field work. So for this novel as well. So I'm glad you're writing a bigger novel discussing this, and I'm looking forward to read that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask,
because I didn't go looking for any of the traffickers, but I spoke to the victims,
Yes.
So
yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's also multivocal like this work as well. Yeah. I also wanted to ask, like, why did it take it so long for you to publish this book from 2014 till 2023?
yeah.
When you revised a lot, you worked really hard on this book, but it has taken you a very, very long time. And this is not your first book. You have written, you're an established writer. You got like one of the biggest literature prize in Nigeria and perhaps in Africa, if I'm not wrong. So why did it take you so long? Was it just an artistic process or was it something else?
So part of it was the artistic process. Part of it was perhaps when we wanted to sell it the first time, it was probably not ready, and for which I'm grateful. And between when it was ready to go to be sold and when we eventually sold it, I think we had 2 offers from 2 publishers that I told my agent not to accept because I did not think that the offers were right, not in terms of money, but I did not think that those houses were right for the book. And so, and I was quite willing to wait until it found a good home. And I'm, really, really delighted that Ella bought it because I love working with Ella. I worked with her on Black Sister Street. Ella is an incredible editor. She looks at her work and she knows what's wrong. She might not tell you how to fix it, but she tells you, okay, this isn't really working, right? And I think this is why it's not working, right? Yeah.
How was the process of working with Ella? You have worked in 2 books now, yes. So
I've worked with, so with Night Dance, I started with her, but then she left Cape and somebody else took over. So 2 books. Ella is an incredible reader, right? But she's also, as an editor, she knows, she knows what makes a novel work, right? So she will tell you this structure is not right, and then you can go back and sort of work on different structures and come back. And if it works, she tells you, okay, now I think it's working. But she will not impose her will on you. So Ella leaves you enough freedom for this to remain your work, but she gives you enough guidance to make it better.
Yeah. I was just wondering also about this structure. There is obviously a lot of Nani and there's multivocal. This is something that you have done before. How different it was to write a novel that is in multiple perspectives for you?
Yeah.
And why did you choose again this perspective? Of course, one of the reasons is that you wanted the Ephraim's voice to come in and also prepare the reader for it, as you said, how different it is. And then of course, Bhakti is also asking about the role of the chorus. So can you tell us about these voices that kind of clamoring for attention and grabbing our attention repeatedly gaining in the book?
Yeah, thank you. So the chorus is just to pay homage to the original, Greek tragedy. But also in Igbo tradition, we believe in ancestors, right? And so when people die, they don't go up to heaven, they go to the ground where ancestors live. and then they become ancestors, which is why you pour libation to the ancestors into the earth, right? But for this novel, I wanted an ancestor that was very close to Nani's age, you know. I wanted an ancestor that was also very close to Nani. There are things that the siblings know about you, for those who have siblings, that your parents would never, ever know, right? And your siblings tend to know you better than your parents do, right? And so I wanted somebody who knows Nani very well enough to tell us to fill in the gaps in Nani's life for us, but also somebody close in age to Nani, so that the voice is both wise and young. And I think that was where the challenge was for me, you know, creating a voice that wasn't just wise, because often when we think of wisdom and ancestors, we're thinking of old people, right? So I wanted a voice that was young, wise, and intimate, Nani. So that's what the choice of Udodi. I didn't want her death to be just a prop. I wanted her death to be more meaningful to the novel. And the way for her death to be more meaningful to the novel is for her to still stay there and be there as the chorus, right? And then for Nani's younger sister, Ugo, I wanted a voice that was, I wanted all of the voices, in fact, to show the personalities of the characters. I wanted the voices to work as well as characters in themselves, right? So for Nani's, for Ugo, you know, she's young and she's dizzy and so I wanted you to get that from the way that she talks. And I think her part is written in third person, but I wanted you to get all of her interests. You know, she loves music and she's very, you know, somewhat selfish. And when she talks, I hope that you get that, right? And then for Ephraim, I wanted, without having to explain, the reader, when they read Ephraim's voice, to get the personality of this person who is trying to, who is not just a narcissist, but who is also trying to make up for something, somebody whose self-esteem is so low and they try to cover it up with something else. I didn't want to have to write it. I didn't want Nani to be the one to explain it, but I wanted it to show in the way that he speaks. And so the voices, the challenge in writing all of these 4 voices was in capturing exactly what I wanted the voices to do. Not just to show that these are 4 different people, but also to capture their personalities in the way that they speak and the way that they present themselves to the reader in their own words.
Yeah, thank you. I have lots of questions. I think we have about 5 minutes till 12:40, but I wanted the audience to come in. But I have 2 quick questions. One of the questions is that I have always admired your very strong connections with, I admire everything about you, Chika, but this is also one of the things I admire about you, is that it's a very strong connection with the Nigerian publishing industry. And I think there's, as we talk so much about the Indian novel being written and mediated through the American and the US creative writing programs, I think similar conversations are echoing also in Nigeria, and these are very big major conversations. And I don't really have a sort of, you know, yes, fashion bhakti, absolutely, but also but I don't moralize the issue, and I don't think there is a binary sort of conversation that is very useful to us. But I wanted to know your thoughts on Nigerian writing in Nigeria, produced in Nigeria, Nigerian storytelling. I was listening to a podcast, I really can't refer to it now. One of them was talking about Nigerian graphic novel and Nigerian comics. And they were saying that these storytellers violate everything that you would see in a Western style storytelling, and that is going to change the storytelling techniques of many Nigerian writers. Just the way manga and Japanese storytellers have challenged conventional modes of those, you know, 3-act structure, the Blake Snyder beat sheet that we see, which I think we all know about because we are in creative writing programs, but at the same time, we all try to write away and outside from it. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Your books are published by Nigerian publishers too, and I know that you try to have them published very, very consciously, because first of all, obviously, it's the affordability question you want your readers to read, but also you want to work with Nigerian readers very closely. And I like that commitment and I admired it, but I also wanted your thoughts more on that.
Geez, I think that, I've been thinking about this because I'm going to give a talk later today.
Oh.
The 1962 Makerere Conference, right? The African Writers Conference in 1962, when they couldn't agree on who an African writer was, right? Because, Ngugi was like, okay, if you're writing only in English and not in African languages, are you an African writer? What of those who sort of write in Lusophone and in other languages? And but one thing that they seemed to have agreed on was what their role as African writers was, right? And that role was to present the politics and people and cultures of Africa to the world, by which I mean the West, right? And so they very consciously wrote in this way to show the world. I mean, we think of things fall apart. Yes, we're here. We're people too. We're people like you. We're not savages, and we're not stupid, and we're not all of the other things that Achebe said Africans were presented as in books that he had read in school, right? And then you move to the 21st century, right? With the growth of indigenous publishing, right? And publishing people locally. The conversation now shifts from saying, yeah, we're here to we're just having fun. We're talking to each other. We're writing whatever we want to write. Somebody writes all the men in Lagos are mad and then infuses it with all of the stories of Lagos men. These are stories that are not talking back to the empire. The empire doesn't exist. You're writing alongside, the erstwhile colonial centers, right? You're not writing back to that colonial center, you're writing alongside it. And, they're welcome to the party. They're welcome to come and eat the fufu and the jollof rice and whatever else you're serving, but you're not writing for them. You're not removing the spice because it's going to be too spicy for them, right? So that gaze no longer means anything. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense, because I said essay I'm writing, how spicy? Spice level adjusted, right? That's the state of translation. That's the state of multiculturalism.
Absolutely.
Right? You go to a Nigerian Indian restaurant and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which level spice?
Yeah, absolutely. But when you're writing for yourself and you're writing for your people, then none of those things matter anymore. And then other people can come in and enjoy that work on your own terms, which is what indigenous publishing has made possible, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I love what you said. I think this whole clip could be like a big panel discussion between the two of us, and Bhakti would join, Nathan would join. We all will be really, really having fun, probably. But I really want to end on a high note. But did you want to add something?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely true, because I think like many years ago, the Indian publisher Chiki Sarkar wrote something that Bollywood is an example, even though however flawed, it's controversial, it's an example of Indians consuming stories by and for Indians, making stories for Indians. And she said that the Indian pulp also is like that. And I remember Chimamanda Adichie writing something many years ago, how Nollywood is an example of the same, how they don't want to care about the West, the empire, explain anything, just Nollywood stories for people in Nigeria. And I feel the same about indigenous languages, indigenous publishing, and they really challenge and also enrich and expand this traditional modes of storytelling that the West keeps on talking about. It's a 3-act structure, Blake Snyder beat sheet. I recently learned about the Fletcher sheet as well, the Fletcher, which is basically escalating tension. Apparently, Yellow Face is written in that style. So,
that there was an essay by Achebe in 1984 where he says that in the essay, he says that critics of his novels and of other African novels, were saying that those novels did not even qualify as novels because they didn't follow the form.
Yeah, I know. Like, who tells us what's the form? I have a question in the chat with Bhakti. Who are these dudes? These are all, I think, American dudes in California. But I really want to open the house for questions and conversations. Yeah, yeah. And And please, you're welcome to ask a question. And thank you so much, Chika, for this very spirited answers, and that really sort of like may have made my day already. Yeah, thank you.
Well,
I'm just,
thank you, Aruni, and you still owe me dinner.
yeah.
I do.
Well,
you have to come here. I have for you.
I'm gonna jump in for some format things. So whoever wants to ask questions, just raise your hand and then I can spotlight you. I'm going to start with a question that I've been thinking about, just to poke a little bit, Chika, on the kind of depiction of class in the book. You know, this wealthy girl and this like extremely crude lower class man, you know, and I see how it works with sort of Persephone. I like that. I like the idea of rewriting that myth because it's such a cruel myth. But yeah, how did you, what did you feel as you were, what were some of the negotiations when you're kind of placing this princess, in one setting, and they are the good people, and then there's bad guy, who's not very educated, and things like that.
Yeah, so thank you. He's not bad because he's poor, right? He just happens to be both, poor and manipulative, right? And there's a way in which wealth, especially in a society that is as class conscious as Nigeria, can keep. There's a way in which wealth, especially in societies that are class conscious as Nigeria, can blind you, right, to what's going on around you, right? And it makes you really vulnerable because you're not even aware of your surroundings, right? So you have your gate man, you have the cook who does everything, you have the gate man who locks up the gate after you, you have the driver, you don't know how to take a cab on your own because you've never had to, right? You wouldn't be able to survive if all of those domestic help were to decide to go on strike for a single day, you know? So I think that was also part of that exploration. Part of Nani's vulnerability is exactly because of the class that she belongs to.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. She's also very young, and that's, and I know that you're showing, I think in the US, they call it, in like pop psychology, it's called like battered wife syndrome, like the fear of being free also, and it's almost surprising that it ends the way it does, and the role of course, the auntie in that as well, and the power of the wealth to get him, locked up. I think that was kind of key and interesting. So no, I understand what you're saying about the class intensity, class divisions and the intensity around it. So who has questions? Somebody? Nathan, hold on, I'm going to add you.
Thanks, and thanks so much, Aruni and Chika, for the fascinating interview. I was also going to ask about class, so I'm glad Bhakti sort of headed us in that direction. I was worried that, if this is a kind of rewriting of Persephone myth, Nani was going to get stuck for half the year with Ephraim. So I'm glad that didn't turn out, and also found it really interesting then that it seemed to me the main conflict near the end was really about her relationship to her daughter. So I wondered if you could just speak a little bit more about sort of your decisions around how to end the novel and on Nani's relationship as a mother to her own children.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the reasons why, I think this is the first novel that I've written where I sort of knew how it was going to end before I started writing it, because I wanted a particular type of ending. Very often I just let the characters lead me to whatever ending that they want to lead me to. But for me, this was really about rewriting, as a form of justice, right, for the Persephone character. And some people have said to me that, Nani's mother was so nasty and she didn't love her daughter. And I say, well, she loved her daughter, but she was loving or she was loving her daughter within the framework of a culture, right? That sort of told her that her obligation to her daughter meant that she had to act a certain way. And obligation is also a form of love, right? So juxtaposing her mother to the way Nani's relationship with her daughter and Nani's love for her daughter, I guess I just sort of trying to show how women can be, I'm trying to find a way to phrase this so it comes off sounding okay. I wanted to explore all the ways in which love can work in oppressive societies and in oppressive systems, right? So for Nani's mother, her obligation to her daughter meant that she could not love her children, or she wasn't free to love her children the way that she might have wanted to, right? And for Nani, her love for her children is complicated by the fact that she has these children with a man that she does not love, like she has no relationship at all with this man, but her children love this man, right? And so she's sort of having to negotiate that, the tension between how do I raise these kids who love their father, who is such a terrible person? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I also feel sometimes that in different cultures, people don't understand a language of love. You know, the language of love is different in different cultures.
Yeah,
I think that, yeah.
No, go on.
What are you referring to, Aruni?
That somebody told her that Nani's mother did not love her as, you know, as much as she should have loved her. But I feel that we need to, especially in the West, we need to say it very explicitly that I love you and I care about you. But on the other hand, in India or South Asia, people would say, do this, do that. That's the language of love. Like if you're sick, they're not going to say, oh, I'm so sorry, XOXO. They're going to say, have tulsi ginger tree. You know, it might come across as that, but actually what they're saying is, I really care about you, you know, and many people are not used to that language of love and care because in different cultures, it means different things. So in your context, obligation and the responsibility she had for their children was the love.
Yeah. Can I, please, folks, please raise your hands. But until then, tell me about the middle daughter. Like, did the significance of that middleness build? I know there is a primary trauma that sets off this unbroken line now breaks, like this lovely family, you know, everything is shattered with these two deaths. What does the term middle daughter, because middle daughter means something very specific, at least within American culture and so on. What did it mean for you?
I think that Nani is who she is because of her position in the family, you know, so she's having to negotiate between the youngest and the eldest, and she's trying to please everybody, right? And that affects the way that she acts and the way that she reacts to things. But the title only came long after the novel was written. Actually, I had a one-hour meeting with Ella deciding on what to call the book, because we had different titles that she didn't like. And then she made some propositions that I didn't like. And at the end, I said, you know what, she's the middle daughter, so we'll just call it that. Okay,
that's funny. All right. That reminds me of when Sitsi Dangaremba was asked, where did you come up with this first line of your novel, which is of nervous conditions, which is, I was not sorry when my brother died, you know. And she said, oh, you know, I was very young and I was wanted to write a novel, and I was reading these creative writing manuals where they said you must have a very gripping first line. So whatever, you know, we were looking for the meaning in that was totally different. Olivia, I'm gonna add you here. She has a, sorry, how can you start video or just speak?
Yes, hi there. Thanks a lot, Baki. I think I'm saying it correctly. And hi, Chika. Really lovely to be part of this discussion. And thank you so much for hosting it. Aruni, I think it's really enlightening to hear some of the backstory towards this novel. Obviously, I think when you read the novel, I am a Black woman. I'm based in Manchester, England, and I've read on Black Sister Street, and there's a theme there in terms of Black suffering, particularly with women. And I think I'm just coming to grips with it, with how you sort of working to getting into writing about violence, particularly violence against Black women. I think it's very much seems to be almost a recurring theme, not to deny the fact that there's a very historical sort of journey there in terms of the Black women suffering. And I think there's a discussion I was having with somebody whether our suffering is less because we are in the West or it's still the same. I think that for me is very, very interesting. And I just like to hear your perspective on that, and particularly where we are when I look at certain sort of issues such as Black Lives Matters, and there's a very, very much separation in terms of actually Black Lives Matters, but there's a very, very heavy suffering in terms of certain aspects, particularly for the women, and it never ends, and we're always at the back end. So I'm saying a lot of things I appreciate, but I just wanted to hear your perspective, if that's okay. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Olivia. Thanks for joining us from Manchester. Is our suffering less because we're in the West? No, I think our suffering, I have a problem with sort of weighing suffering, right? Because I don't think it's something that you can weigh exactly, right? We all suffered in different ways, but our suffering is still particular to us. And one person's suffering doesn't necessarily weigh more than the other person's suffering. It's just a different type of suffering. And I think, yeah, so what's I guess that's my opinion on it, right? That we're all suffering, but we are suffering in different ways, right? And it's and I don't know how to weigh that suffering in terms of whose suffering is more, right? I think that my duty as a writer is to continue to write the stories that haunt me, because that is how I come to writing. I don't think I could sit down and just start writing if I wasn't haunted by a particular story, a particular theme, right? Does that make sense, Olivia?
It does a little bit. I think maybe there was a point where, because it's such a poignant way of depicting, and particularly Nani's story, and I think maybe there was a point where I wondered whether we could have had an happy ending. Whether that is, I think when you read the story, and obviously I've read your other books, and there's a point where you almost feels like it's almost passed down generational suffering, and it's.
But it is, no?
Yeah.
We have two questions on the chat. May I read them out, or?
I'll read Alex's question. Chika, Alex Dawson wrote the very detailed review of your book on Africa as a Country, and he has he's actually just had a baby, so we forgive him for not coming on the video.
Congratulations.
He asks, can you say more about the structure of the novel and the decision to begin where it does? Yeah, I agree. You said earlier you knew early on, you knew how it would end. Did you also know how you wanted to begin in the middle of the story with Nani already hating Ephraim, and then come back to the situation towards the end?
So thank you for the review, Alexis, and congrats on your baby. I wish you lots of joy with the baby. I hope that the baby always brings you happiness. So I knew how it would end, but I didn't know how it would begin. And where it begins now isn't really where it began in 2014. And it's not where it began with the second, third, fourth drafts. So the structure always comes last for me. And sometimes my editor has an input on the structure. So when she says this structure isn't working, then I go back and try to sort of figure out why it's not working and how to do it well. And I decided to begin with the chorus, because I liked the ending of that very first chorus, and so life is, right? Because everything about, I think that fiction is what made flesh, right? It's life, it's about life. And I wanted to sort of begin it there, and so life is, and so this world is created, and so this world begins. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question. But while I knew where it would end, I didn't know where it would begin. And the structure came after so many drafts, and I kept it like that because it seemed to work best.
There's one more question. Okay, I'm going ahead and reading it out. Is Doda's personality meant to give Nani a different perspective on life, gender roles, etc.? He and Nani's mother society have very different angles on things. This is what I have thought of this character. Thank you. By Onane.
Thank you very much, Nani. I think that sometimes fathers get a raw deal in novels, especially in novels where the theme is DV, as is this. And also very often when people talk about the problems of misogyny or patriarchy or whatever, most people then come back with, well, not all men, right? And I think I wanted to use Nani to explore the fact that it doesn't matter if you have one good man or one good father, if the society makes it easy for patriarchy to or for misogyny to thrive, right? That one person is not going to save you. So as long as Nani's father was there, Nani was saved. But once Nani's father dies, right, Nani is left to the wolves, the same as every other person, because society itself is flawed, right? So the reaction to, even though her father's reaction to rape is different, and if her father were alive, she might have been able to go to her father to talk to him. The fact that her society discusses rape in the terms that they do is still problematic, right? So I think one of the things that her father's character explores is the fact that if we want change, then the change has to be holistic, and it has to be, for it to be meaningful, it doesn't have to be just one person changing. It has to be whole. It has to be society changing.
I wanted to ask Michael, please.
Just wanted to thank you again for the discussion, but I missed when you were talking about some of your research going to spend time with women. I didn't catch whether was it Nigerian women, or did you do your research in Georgia, and would it have mattered?
So thank you, Michael. No, it was Nigerian women. So I got a generous grant from my university, and I went back to Nigeria. And my characters are Nigerian, so it made sense to do the research, in Nigeria with Nigerian characters.
Chika, did you adjust the spice level on the baby factories?
No, no, I did not. I mean, at least not for Nani's mother, right? Because Nani's mother does not think of herself as a trafficker. She thinks of herself as a very good person.
Savior, yeah.
The savior, yeah. And I knew a woman in Enugu long ago who I eventually learned that, she had a baby factory as well, who thought of herself the same way. And that was also the way that she was spoken of. She was this very generous person who would have, balked at the idea that anybody thought that she was doing something terrible by selling these babies. As far as she was concerned, very much like Nani's mother, she was providing a service. But it was also important for me to sort of hear the other side, right? Sort of hear about women who, for whom it did not end, or it does not end like the way it ends for the women that Nani's mother kept in her hospital, and she fed them well. And so it was important to also hear the other stories, to hear stories of women locked up and raped and sort of just being cared for their wombs. You're
Bhakti, you
muted.
were muted.
I felt supportive of the mother, and I felt like
Mm.
Nani, after what happens and how she has the baby, should understand that her mom is actually may help in such a situation anyway. But that was like, that's the kind of conflicts you were creating in the reader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like even the kind of books that I love to read too. I like characters who are not very easy to judge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because even if some people have asked me, does he have a mental health issue? I said, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I can't, diagnose him. But I'm also very wary of using mental health challenges to cover up for people who do bad things. Right.
Yeah. Marion.
Hi, thank you, Chika, for your novel. I read it in like one day. Couldn't put it down. And what I found so fascinating, especially being somebody from like that type of society, was that when I read the book and then the father died, I was like, oh, here we go. They're about to become poor. What is going to happen now? And that was such an interesting choice to me, that the mother was just so hell-bent on maintaining their status. She was like unaware on how to help her children through their grief. Can you talk about that? And just like women and what happens when they lose their powerful husbands and have to carry on with their lives, and yeah, what happens to the families?
Thank you, Marion. I mean, in many of our societies, like we know, and like you've sort of pointed out, when fathers die, especially when those men are the breadwinners of the family, his family tend to swoop in on the family, and so his brothers and whoever else, and take everything away from the widow. There are many families that have gone into penury because the husbands died. And I did not want that to be Nani's mother's fate. And I think, I don't remember because I haven't reread this novel since I wrote it, but I think that her own, she'd sworn never to be poor or something. I don't remember. Is she the one, or is it another character? I don't remember.
But her brother-in-law comes, and like he says, in the olden times, you would have been my wife. I would taken all the practices that get lost. Jesus asked him to get.
Yeah. And she's very much aware of the fact that society is waiting for her to fail. And so she's determined that she would not fail. That her 3 daughters, she doesn't have any sons, so she feels that she doesn't have any, like culturally, she's already at a disadvantage because she doesn't have a son for her husband, right? And then she has her 2 daughters to look after, and she's aware that society is waiting for her to fail. She's aware of that. She's aware of that fact, right? She's aware of how women like her have ended up, and she's determined to do whatever she needs to do, or whatever she needed to do, to make sure that would not be her fate, and that would not be her children's fate. And that is also in a way why she's very strict with her children, right? Because she's aware that any failure on their part, if they were to get pregnant, if they were to get raped, if they were to get not to get an education, that she would be blamed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can see so many parallels, like in my own society back in India, like this. And I think sometimes I wonder if it is very hard to understand if somebody has not grown up in these societies, where how difficult it is for a woman who is widowed, and
absolutely. I think one of the first times I realized just how very, very unfair this whole system was when my uncle died, and his wife was still in college. She had just gone back to college, and around the time of his funeral, she was studying for her exams, right? So this is a woman who's lost a husband, who's grieving her husband, but who was also determined to get the education that her husband wanted her to get. And I remember one day we were sitting down together and she was studying. And as soon as we heard footsteps, so somebody who had come to see her, she quickly hid the book under the chair, and she had to assume this face of, real sadness, because otherwise she would be faulted. And I thought, wow, this is just so unfair. It's unfair that she has to pretend to live a certain kind of life because her husband is dead. It's not enough for people that she's mourning and grieving and wanting to move on. You can't want to move on if he's dead. Remember, my mother told me that in her village in the olden days, that when a man died, you weren't allowed to eat. When your husband died, you weren't allowed to eat with a spoon or a fork or anything that would make you collect enough food. You were supposed to eat with a stick, and whatever food fell off the stick belonged to your husband, and whatever food you had left on the stick was yours to keep. And so these women got really, really hungry, right? And you weren't supposed to eat any food that was made with spices. You weren't supposed to eat any food that tasted good, because you were supposed to be mourning this husband. But then for the men, it wasn't the same thing. Their wives died and they were expected to remarry immediately so that somebody could look after them, right? So the double standards, it's just incredible.
It just we have a question from Winfred, but we'll take one. I'll ask you one last question, but I want to share this really fascinating and weird anecdote. When my grandmother died, and this speaks to how women are constantly policed, how they are mourning or not. All my aunts, after 2-3 days of her cremation, they kind of ganged up on one of the maids that we used to live in a joint family, that she didn't cry enough. And I'm like, why should she cry? She's not even related to us. But they're like, she's so cruel. She didn't cry enough, And look at us, we were crying so much. And it really sort of reminded me of what you said just now. It's absurd, but at the same time, like, it is so common
it's
how
reality, yeah.
The society, women are constantly policed, whether they're mourning enough, whether they're laughing enough. It's just like so common. Winfred, please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, it's not more of a question, it's more of a comment. I was very lucky to read that book before it was published, because Chika gave it to me to read.
Me too.
Who's the middle daughter?
I am the middle daughter. So I do have, I see a little bit of myself in Nani. And I was so angry after reading that book. I was super angry because I told Chika that I don't think Ephraim was punished enough. And she said, no, I just want to live. I said, no, I'm just going to go in my head and make up my own punishment for Ephraim. And I make up all kinds of ways that Ephraim should suffer. And growing up in kind of a strict family, I remember I was very, very naive. And that's why I see a part of Nani. I mean, I was very naive and I was very trusting. I remember going to a friend's house and she wasn't there, and coming very close to being raped by the older brother. And by God's grace, very last minute, I was saved. But then I was going home, I was 1 hour late at my curfew. I was supposed to be home by 8 o'clock. I think I got home at 9 o'clock with 5-hour curfew. And I was flogged, I was punished. And I felt so happy being punished because what would have happened if the inevitable happened, if I was raped, I don't know if I would have been able to tell my parents that, because that would even mean even more punishment for me for why did you go there in the first place? Why did you go there at this time of night? And so reading that book, I was just so angry for days, and I wanted something really super bad to happen to Nani, and unfortunately, happened to Ephraim, and that book kind of, unfortunately, a lot of things like this happen in Nigeria, and growing up too, I've heard stories from friends and how they're hiding such things from their parents because they're very scared of being punished, And so, Chika, next time, I just want people like, I'll help you devise punishments for characters like Ephraim. Yeah, that was just, but it was an awesome book to read, and kind of hunted me.
Thank
And-
you. Well, you know, a writer writes a book and the readers take it further. So
Yeah.
a writer, yeah.
Yeah, so glad to see the comment that the reader has taken ownership of the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most
But you know, that's
wonderful
what
thing.
readers are supposed to do. I mean,
Yeah.
you write a book and you give it to the reader, and it's no longer yours. It becomes the reader's, right? And the reader can write the ending.
Yes, absolutely. My last question, and okay, I would let Nikas quickly ask a question and then I'll ask my last question. Nikas is my student from Assam. Nikas, go ahead.
Thank you. Today, the middle daughter has entered to the house with 1,000 stories. Thank you all for this beautiful conversation. My question is that when composing the novel, is there any autobiographical elements there? And if any, if they cause any trouble for you, or do they help you to build the story?
Thank you. So Nani and myself are completely different. The only the only thing that we have in common is that we grew up in Enugu, and I love Enugu a lot. So we grew up in the same city.
Okay,
but there's no autobiography in it. I don't think that I could write an autobiography. It's also the same reason why I write really poor poetry. I find it very difficult to write about myself or about people close to me. I need to take a distance from things in order to write them properly. So thank you, Nick.
Great question and great answer. That actually brings me to my last question. It kind of very nicely segues into it. Even when you're talking about death and everything, there's a little bit of like humorous, satirical distance from it. You know, how the maid comes and starts saying, even I'm finished. And the mother says, how are you finished? And I was actually like, oh God, what is this? You know, like I was laughing and at the same time sad. And I want to say that Chika is also a very humorous person, you know, and a few years ago, she was in my home in Athens, and then one of my friends offered her a drink at the end of the talk, and he said, you should, and he's very health conscious, you should drink this, there's no sugar, and there is also no caffeine. And Chika said, why should I drink it then? And I remember laughing so much because we never thought about that. Oh yeah, all these drinks, they don't have sugar, they don't have caffeine. Why are we drinking them? There's artificially flavored.
Are you punishing yourselves?
I wanted to say, you know, that Chika, you have this humor, that underlying humor in many parts of the book. And this is a significant, this is a very important marker of your writing, the distance that you have. Are you conscious of that? Do you employ it, or this is how you look at the world?
I mean, I think that the world is so, I mean, the world of this book especially is so gloomy and dark, and it can become very overwhelming if you're not laughing, you know. So it's a bit like a horror movie, you know, like if it's horror, then it becomes too much. So you need to show a bit of horror and then some humor, and then, you know, you can come up and breathe, and then you go back into the horror, into the darkness of it. I think that part of good storytelling is knowing when to break up the darkness, because the night can be so overwhelming, right? You don't want people coming into your book and not being able to breathe. You want to give them space to breathe, and then they have the energy to come back in and dive into the darkness again, you know.
Beautiful, Chika. I mean, we've now kept you way longer than the promised hour, and you're giving a talk today. And to talk about humor, I was just looking at you as you were laughing about the woman who was eating with the stick, the widow. you were like, it's the funniest thing, and she was so hungry. But anyway, so I see this where this question comes from Aruni. But I think we should wrap up, right? Unless somebody has like a really like burning thought. We'll give it like 5 seconds. I think not. Thank you.
Just thank you to everyone for giving me so much of your time. There wouldn't be writers without readers, and to see people come out from different parts of the world just for, you know, for this is very touching. I don't take it for granted. So thank you. And thank you for having me back to you. And
you're welcome. I think there was some cross messaging around because first it was, you know, if it's just a talk, people feel more safe to come. If it's also says book club, then everybody wants to do it and then they don't read the book and everybody gets stressed. And we had a lot of registrations, but you know, I'm seeing that some of the people probably chickened out from not having read, which is never a good thing. But thank you so much, Aruni and Chika.
Thank you.
It was good.
Long live radical books.